Okay, welcome everybody. Nice to see so many people here on a wonderful Friday morning, and thank you for coming to another webinar in our Teach Anywhere series. My name is Richard Swan. I'm the Associate Director for the Center for Teaching and Learning, and I would like to thank Sarah Clark and Joey Stanley and Katrina Wilkins, as well as Julie Swallow from the CTL, for presenting for us today on how to make a good first impression with your syllabus. And what we'll do is we will let Joey go first, and Katrina, and then Sarah. Julie will follow up with some wrap up and summary from the CTL, and then we'll open it up for question and answer. If you would like to record some of your questions in the chat, we'll try to get to those, especially during the question and answer period. If you could reserve your questions otherwise until that time, that would help us out immensely. So with that, again, thank you for being here, and I will turn things over to Joey.
All right, thanks. I've been asked to talk about how I explain office hours in my syllabus. So let's get started with this. Let's see, make sure I can progress. All right, so the way that I've explained office hours, I have an entire page, and this is it right here. So I've given you the full text of how I've explained this, and I want to highlight a few things. So it has its own page. At the very top of my syllabus, when I explain when my office hours are, I have a little note there saying what are office hours, see below for details. And then I have these this whole page that is a dedicated section. I figure since I'm not printing my syllabi, I don't need to worry about saving trees because they're all just handed out digitally anyway. So the way that I've explained this, I do it in 4 paragraphs that I'll explain in just a second. So I have the basics, emphasis on the student, what to talk about, and letters of recommendation. And I ensure that people read it because I have a syllabus quiz at the end of the first week of class to sort of force people to do it. And one of the questions has a really nitpicky detail that is only found in this section. So that sort of forces people to read through it. The first paragraph here is just the basics of when and where office hours happen. And I also explain a few things that I wish I knew when I was a student. So that one is that you don't need to have an appointment. You can just stop by, and if the door is closed, which it's usually not, just go ahead and knock. So that was something that I think it was worth it to explain to people. The next paragraph is emphasizing the student and that office hours are meant for them. It's not an inconvenience, and students aren't wasting my time when they come into office hours. I think some students have this impression that those are the only times that I'm in my office. That's the only time I have to prepare for classes or do anything. And I emphasize to them that that's time that I've set aside for them. And if no one's there, then I'm gonna, do some other stuff. But my primary purpose during those few hours a week is for them. I reiterated that they can drop by anytime that they want, and I encourage students to get comfortable and stay for a while. Sometimes you get students that come in and they don't take their jacket off or their backpack off, so they sort of sit there on the edge of their seat, and they feel like they need to get in and out as quickly as they can. And while they may have their own reasons for why they don't want to stay for too long, I want them to know that one of those reasons should not be because they feel like they're wasting my time. The third paragraph, I explicitly explain why people should come by. I feel like this is it's not just knowledge that students just know, and I feel like it's helpful to them to be told exactly what office hours are for. I think some students think that office hours are just sort of remedial lessons in some way. So if you didn't understand something in class, that's why you would go to office hours. Or if you were gone from class, then you would come into office hours, but that's not true. So in this paragraph, I explained some things that I wish I knew as a student, and I guess things that I experienced as a student. So one is that it seems like the most memorable experiences that I had as a student happened when I was in people's offices. It's not very often that you have access to someone who is a master at what they do, and you can ask them anything you want about their expertise. And so so that was really helpful for me. Sometimes it was nice to get a second opinion about things I learned in some class, whether it was because I wasn't sure about it or for some other reason. If I had some project, whether it was for class or not, it was nice to go into office hours and explain it to my professors and get some validation and feedback, which was nice. And I learned how to apply to graduate school. And then when I was a grad student, I learned how to apply for jobs. I asked my professors about opinions about certain schools, how to search for schools, how to put together the materials, and that all happened during office hours. And then it was just nice for me to see that they are actually human beings. So when I see their plants or their tchotchkes or their framed pictures of their families, it's nice to see them in some other context besides in the front of a classroom. And so these are things that were valuable for me when I was a student. So I use this third paragraph to sort of explain those kinds of things to my students. The last paragraph is about letters of recommendation. So there are two purposes here. One is that it's sort of a heads up for them. Some of the brightest students sometimes don't feel like they need to come into office hours because they don't need to learn more or everything was clear. And they're the ones that want to apply to grad school. And so I tell them that I can't really write you a good letter of recommendation if you're just another student in my class. I can say how good of homework assignments you turned in, but I can't really say too much more. And so I encourage them to come in if they want me to write a letter of recommendation for them so that I can get to know them better. It's also kind of insurance for me. So this is a thing that I do. So I don't want to write letters for people that I don't know very well. And so if there's someone who comes in towards the end of the semester and asks me to write a letter, I will usually say yes, but I'll do it begrudgingly. And I'll say, hey, look, like at the syllabus that you read, it said that you should have come here a few more times for me to get to know you better. And so that's sort of something that I've done. I've also included a few things that you don't normally see in syllabi. So one is that I mentioned that I have food in my office. This is something that I do have, and I encourage people to eat it because if they don't, I will. But the whole starving student trope is a real thing for some people. And I want to provide them a space where they know they can actually grab some food if they actually need it. I mentioned one of my hobbies. So in the third paragraph there, I say they can come into my office and talk about bread making. I think in my more recent syllabi, I talk about succulents because I have like 30 of them right here. So this is something that I feel like adds a little bit of personality to this. I also use what I think the CTL is calling warm language. So things like I use a lot of contractions because the style of writing here is pretty informal, as opposed to most other portions of the syllabus, which can be somewhat formal and rigid and formulaic. Here, I tend to let my hair down a little bit and be a little bit less formal. And one way to do that is just by using contractions. I also just use less formal language. So whether it be casual words and expressions or punctuation that's not considered normal, formal or standard, I think this adds help bring the warmth to this section of my syllabus. The tip that I have is I guess I wrote this section as if I had a student in mind and I was writing one lengthy email to that one student. And I've learned that if you envision an audience of one, it makes the writing seem a little more personable than if you envision writing for lots of people. So how has this gone? So last semester, I had about 50 students between my three classes, and I very often had students in my office during office hours. And in fact, it got to the point where I couldn't plan on getting any work done during office hours because students were just always there. There was sometimes literally a line outside my door. Conversations were usually quite long, and they often didn't have to do with class things. People came in and said, hey, I see that your syllabus is typeset and it looks nice. Let's talk about typography. Or someone brought in some succulents for me. We talked about succulents. And people ask about grad school, about various projects they have. Someone asked about just what are some good study habits. So people tend to come in and talk about things not related to class, and I think I call that. I've also found that letters of recommendation to write, because it's the people that come into my office that are the ones that ask me to write letters. So to summarize, I guess my 3 tips are to have an office hours section of your syllabus and draw attention to it. Explicitly teach people what office hours are, because you can't assume that people know what that means. And then write that section as if it's written for one person, which helps, I think, make it a little more personable and something like that. So that's all I have. I encourage you to look at this video by Andrew Eshok if you haven't seen it already. He has kind of a quirky sense of humor, but he explains office hours in a really down-to-earth and funny way. And so if you don't feel like you can write this section of your syllabus, you can send students a link to this video, and I think it will do a much better job for them. Thanks. That's all I have for you guys.
Thank you, Joey. And Katrina, we'll go ahead and turn the time over to you.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. I've been asked to talk about my newsletter style syllabus that I use. And I think the one that was initially kind of pegged was from a few semesters back, and I have sent a newer one to Mike Johnson that I think is going to be uploaded on a website with materials from this. Anyway, I wanted to look at that more recent one just a little bit. I started using this style of newsletter a couple of years ago, and to be honest, the biggest reason really was just because I was bored to death with my syllabuses. I hated opening up a syllabus and seeing just this big black and white document that was just full of huge chunks of text, and I just thought, this is so boring. And it was boring to me as an instructor, and I figured if it was boring to me, it was probably boring to my students as well. And so I started using a newsletter style syllabus instead. So I can put in a little bit of color and some graphic design. There's still pretty big chunks of text, as you can see, but I try to include as much kind of visual interest as I can. So for grading and assignments, for example, I actually use a little pie chart that I create in Excel to show them the different weights of grading categories, and then I just take a screenshot of that and put it into the newsletter. Excuse me. And I try to find images and in this one also some quotations and things that are relevant to what we're doing in the course. So this is a course about editing, and so I have a little quote here from an optional textbook for the course that kind of sums up what we're trying to teach our students here, right? So excuse me. So that's the first thing, was honestly just trying to make things a little more visually interesting and a little more visually what's the word I want? Anyway, visually memorable, I guess. I try to include warm language through as much of it as I can, in particular in my little Meet Your Instructor section, where I just kind of say, I really love this topic and I'm excited to talk about it with you and learn more with you. This particular course has kind of some complicated textbook requirements, so I try to make those really, really clear in the syllabus, right? These are required, these you can access online, this one's optional, and so on. And then we go through, classroom procedures and all the kind of normal things. After hearing Joey talk about this, I'm going to definitely be looking at including a page about office hours and explaining more about what they are. So that's a little look at the actual syllabus. I also wanted to just talk a little bit about what I use to create them. So I personally use Canva, and we can look at that if people want to, but canva.com, anyway, I just remember as it's Canvas, but without the S, so canva.com. It's an online graphic design tool, basically. Excuse me, I think let's go ahead and look at it. If I can find it, there we go. It is It is free. So like most things, there's a free version and then there are some premium things you can pay for. I used the free version of it for years before I ever paid for a single thing. So there are a lot of, you can do a lot of stuff with it using just their free services. But when you get into it, you can actually type in what kind of thing you want to create. I haven't tried Syllabus recently, but okay, we've got Syllabus in there. I usually just use a newsletter template. So I'll search for a newsletter template, and then I just find one that I kind of like the look of it, and I might tinker with the colors and things like that. Excuse me. Once you're in there and you've found one that you want to use, it's really very easy and very intuitive, I find, to change things. We won't go through all of it, but anyway, but this is one of the things that I have used and what I've found useful for this particular product, this syllabus. One of the things I do really like about Canva, I will add, it's not great for word processing. And as somebody who teaches editing, that's kind of a big deal for me. So it's not great for that. And I sometimes, if I have really big blocks of text, in fact, I usually, when I'm teaching a new class, I usually create just a regular black and white, Word document syllabus first, and then I start pulling those things into Canva. So excuse me. But one of the other things I really like about it is that you can upload your own assets, your own files. So this is one of those grading category things, or sometimes I find my own images online someplace of people I've quoted, or things that are relevant to the class and things like that. So I do things like that quite a lot. Excuse me. A couple of other things that I wanted to mention. We were asked to talk about what effect this design has had on our students. And to be honest, I'm not all that sure, actually. I've really never asked my students how they feel about my syllabus. I do, like Joey and like a lot of you probably, I do have a little syllabus quiz in the first week of class usually, to just encourage them to actually read it. And then after about the first week of class, I just expect them to know what's in the syllabus. And if they ask me things that are in the syllabus, I tend to redirect them to that first. Or just remind them there's more information about this in the syllabus. So here's my quick answer, but you can find more in the syllabus, etc. And I mean, I haven't had any students kind of reach out to tell me that they loved it or they hated it. I'm not sure anybody has ever had a student reach out to talk to them about their syllabus and their syllabus design. But I know for myself, it certainly helps me. It helps me feel more excited about the class. It helps me, I tend to kind of color code them as well. So if I'm teaching several different classes in the same semester, I kind of have different color schemes for each of them, and it helps me just kind of quickly remember which course I'm thinking about at the moment. Excuse me. And then the other thing I just wanted to add, as far as from the student perspective, I am finding at BYU, I think most of the students tend to just access the syllabus online. That's how I provide it to them. And most of them, I think, just tend to download it and use it on their computer or their device. But I do have some students still who will print the syllabus, and they want it printed like that. So I would recommend providing a second version, either just kind of a grayscale version of the newsletter style syllabus, or just a black and white text version of it if they want to print it, just because it's easier on paper and ink, and especially if they have to pay for their printing or anything, it's just a little bit easier for them that way. So that's all I have. So I guess I will go ahead and stop. I'll stop my share and then can answer some questions a little bit later.
Okay, go ahead, Sarah.
All right. Hold on just a second. I did all this practice and then it didn't work right. Sorry about that. Here we go. First of all, I just want to say, Joey and Katrina, that was amazing. I already have so many amazing ideas. And that's something that I learn every time I come to a Center for Teaching and Learning workshop, is something new. And both of them, I'm like blown away. So well done. Thank you. My assignment today is to share ideas related to the organization and alignment of your syllabus and your course purpose, the learning outcomes, and the assessments. And yes, that's a lot to cover in 10 minutes. And could you also share student feedback and insight on this work? So I apologize, I'm going to cram a lot in there, but I'm going to take you back to this first slide because I want to ask you this question. Sorry, this gets me emotional, but I want you to think, what kind of vehicle have you built for God? And what I mean by that is, what kind of course are you creating that invites God into your classroom? Because your classroom is a place where he wants to be. And that's what I've used to frame everything that I've done today. And so I wanted to end with that and begin with that, so that that's for first and foremost in your mind. So if we take a look at course purpose, you really have to think about these three things: the course purpose, the learning outcomes, and then the assessments. So if we start right off the bat with the course purpose, you have to begin looking at it through the lens of God. And I bring that up because I taught the same exact courses at another university in Utah, whom I love as well, but I never considered my course through the lens of God until I came to BYU. And after a decade of doing that at a different institution, and now I've been at BYU for 5 years, I have grown immensely as a teacher because I've invited him into my classroom. I never saw the leaps and bounds in growth that I have at BYU. So if you think about him as a passenger in that car that you've created, does he call shotgun? Is he the driver? Or is he in the back seat with a seatbelt on? And then I would ask the same thing about your students. What would they say about the purpose of your course? What would your former students say about the purpose of your course? What map could they provide your current students? So one of the things, this is not going to be as fancy, but one of the things that I do in my syllabus, and I'll just show you this briefly. I have all of these things listed: the course purpose, the student learning outcomes, and we'll get to this chart in a minute. But there's a link here that I share with my students that I rely on my former students to help me teach my current students the purpose of the course. So here's an example of one of those. It's a link that students can go to. And I actually tuck a little note into each of on the first day of class. I give each of them one of these notes, but they can go and read these later. This is so informative for me. Do my former students understand the purpose of my course after they're gone? So here's an example. You're in for the time of your life. Moving things around, sorry. Student teaching interning is just around the corner. I teach a teacher education literacy course. Take things seriously and establish a way to organize all the many ideas and resources you will come in contact with in all your classes throughout the semester. Approach each assignment with your students in mind, and it will surely lead you on the path of success. Allow Dr. Clark to be a mentor for you. She's willing to be vulnerable. Learn from her. She already loves you deeply. Now give it your best effort and you won't look back and regret. Rather, you will look forward with hope and excitement due to your disposition and preparation. Omni 126, put children first. Caitlin is actually a fifth grade teacher in one of our BYU partnership districts. And these go on, I chose 5. And they have really helped me. This was one of the first times I asked my students the last day of class to write a note to the former students about what they can expect in my course and what the course purpose was. And so I realized, okay, if they're focusing more on me, maybe I need to tweak it a little bit. Or if I can't hear God showing up in here, then I might need to tweak things a little bit when it comes to my course purpose as well. So if I take you back, if we look at the next thing that we'll see is the learning outcomes. So if you've got God at the center, like he is the purpose of your course, then the learning outcomes will start to follow. And I would encourage you to think about your discipline and the gospel when you are designing these learning outcomes. I still remember the day that I realized that God was a scientist, a dancer, a chemist, etc., you name it. And so he doesn't, I don't think, I know this, BYU does not want us to diminish our discipline, but he wants us to be creative in how we're allowing God to show up in our discipline. And so the question I'd ask myself, are you pushing the boundaries of your imagination and creativity about your course? And I put two other things on the slide here, the Race, Equity, and Belonging report, as well as the aims of a BYU education, because those have been super helpful in taking my discipline, but then putting it through the lens of the gospel and through BYU. I'll show you the syllabus again in a minute. But at this quote by that I want to share with you, the reason we have yet produced a greater heritage in art and literature and music and drama is not because we have not had talented people. Some have reached great heights in their chosen fields, but few have captured the spirit of the gospel of Jesus Christ and the restoration of it in music, in art, in literature. They have not, therefore, even though they were gifted, made a lasting contribution to the unrolling of the church and the kingdom of God in the dispensation of the fullness of times. They have missed being what they might have become. And I love this quote by Elder Packer because it keeps me pushing as a professor at BYU of merging my discipline and the gospel to create something amazing for my students. So the last part is assessment. So what does learning look like in your classroom? A classroom where God and your discipline are both present. And I want to encourage you, I couldn't do this presentation without bringing this up. Something that I've done at BYU is I've gone to look at other people outside of my discipline to see how they're doing it. And so I'm just going to give you a few examples. One, Dr. Coyne, she teaches in the family life. And I went and did an observation of her classroom and watched her teach and how she got an answer from God about how she needed to become a professor. And then I went and watched Dr. Stice in the business school talk to his students about predicting the future. And I'll never forget when he asked a group of accountant students, do you know anyone who can predict the future? And they were all kind of laughing and joking about it, and they were funny. And I remember him saying, President Nelson knows how to predict the future and how to prepare you for the future. And that kind of stopped me in my tracks. And then also Dr. Robison, I went and watched her teach in a dance class and watched her pour feedback over those students and them accept it so willingly. And it gave me so many good ideas on how to give feedback on the assessments that I was requiring of my students. So I've seen God show up in classes all over on campus. So if you're not sure how to do it, I encourage you to break out. Also the Faculty Development Center and the Center for Teaching and Learning. So many ideas. So let's take a look at my syllabus and see how these come together. So let me pull this up. So I start with the purpose of my course, and I told you I rely on former students to help me articulate it because I notice my students pay closer attention to them than they do to me. And then I take my course learning outcomes and I tie them to the discipline. So these are the expectations that all teachers in the state of Utah are expected to master. And then I also tie them to the International Literacy Association. And then our college is tied closely with BYU public school partnership districts. So I outline those. And then I have them thoughts and questions to consider so that as they are working to accomplish these disciplinary things, I can also tie them to that gospel lens. Have I thought about my own journey to becoming literate, for example? Do I understand the important role that literacy plays in helping me get to know my God on a personal and individual level? I mean, helping them see how these things apply in their life is incredibly valuable. So I'm going to close with this example. I'm going to step back out of the syllabus and just show you how I've taken one of those. So I have my course purpose and the learning outcome. So the purpose is to provide them with information they need to teach literacy to elementary students. The learning outcome is that they'll begin to use that foundational knowledge. And then the last one, typical assessments might be have them do a research paper, have them interview a teacher about that knowledge, have them read a chapter and take a quiz, have them design a brochure to be given to parents. So then what I do is I take all of these possible assessments or learning activities, and I write them on an index card and I lay them out on a table. I do this at the end of every course. And I just kind of rearrange them. And the ones that fit closest to my discipline and my practice are the ones that I hang on to. because that's what I want them to do when they leave. I don't want to just have them do a typical college assignment. So if I were to take you back to this slide, I listed these typical assessments or assignments. The one that I would have them do is design a brochure that gives them a chance to demonstrate that knowledge and information, but at the same time is also contributing to the community because they're sharing that brochure with parents at a parent-teacher conference. So it's just an example of how you can take your course purpose, ground it in the gospel, illustrate it through that learning outcome, and then bring it to life through your assessments and or learning activities. That way I can get a sense for, are they understanding my discipline and are they seeing how God fits into it? Let me close with this thought. This past weekend, I presented at a conference in Chicago, and I went to the Art Institute of Chicago with my husband over the weekend. And while we were walking through and admiring all the art, my husband, who would not say that he is an artist or a musician, doesn't like singing, it's kind of, he does this to entertain me. And he walked around amazed and he said, do you remember that? And the humanities co-presenters will appreciate this. He said, do you remember that art class we had to take, a humanities class we met in college? And I said, yeah. And he said, I wish we'd hung on to that textbook. And to me, that's an example of how, whether you're teaching a general ed class or you're teaching a math class or something, finding ways for it to become valuable to your students. I mean, this is 30 years after the fact, and my husband's wishing that he'd hung on to that textbook. So I just bear witness that the things that we can do in our classroom is huge, but we're the ones right now that are limiting it. If you are not feeling enlightened, healed, and a sense of belonging in your classroom, God is not fully present. What can you do to ensure that happens? And I say that in the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Sarah. Julie, if you will go ahead and take over.
Sure. All right. I'm just going to share my screen. Thank you to Joey and Katrina and Sarah. That was amazing. I think when I first started teaching in higher education years and years ago, I remember being told that my syllabus was a contract. And so as I was thinking like, okay, this is a contract. So I tried to write it in really formal language, and I tried to anticipate all the bad things that might happen so I could slap that contract down at any needed point. And I realized that really it was a missed opportunity, that we don't often think about our syllabi as being motivational, but they really are a motivational document. And they're sometimes students' first introduction to us and to the college system. And certainly the structure of the class, the assignments that they become familiar with in the syllabus, as Sarah was talking, are one of the ways that motivates students. If it's visual and they can come to know you and what's exciting about the subject, that's also motivational. And then certainly the language that we use, and if we focus on students in our syllabus, that is also helpful. There was a study done recently about the things that motivate students in class, either positively or negatively. And if you see, teachers' attitude and course structure make for about 50% or more of either positive or negative motivation in class. And so if students see that they understand what the assignments are and what the purpose of those assignments are, and that they have multiple ways to demonstrate competency, that's really motivating for students. So that course structure is really motivating. And then teacher attitude is woven all the way throughout the syllabi that we saw today, just that these instructors are interested in the success of their students, and you can feel that in the document. So you can make the document visual the way that Katrina did. You can use it to present yourself and your background, quotes that you find interesting, so that you, as Joey was talking, you become humanized to them, and it's probably more approachable as well. We talk about warm language, let's just come up a little bit, and just language that is accessible and that feels encouraging. So again, back when I first started writing syllabi, I was very punitive in my language, but Now, when I write them, I think about being positive. So yes, you can put your, it's kind of the things, your expectations in the syllabus in a positive framework. So late work is eligible for partial credit. I encourage you, we learn from each other, versus, you will be, students are expected to, that kind of language. Finally, if you use learner-centered language, it's really helpful. Again, Joey's breaking down what office hours mean, because to us, office hours make complete sense. So does course policy and learning outcome and course materials. But you might want to consider framing your language in a way that might feel more accessible to your students. So that's just my brief wrap up. I want to thank Sarah and Joey and Katrina again for just excellent presentations. And I think we're opening the floor now for questions if people have them.
Yes, thanks. So go ahead, and if you have a question, go ahead and just unmute and ask your question. If you want to put it in the chat, we'll monitor that as well too.
I didn't have a question, but I just wanted to say, thank you. All four of you have given me such great ideas for how to improve my syllabus for next semester. So I'm going to muse on that for a while.
This is Shelley Reed. I have a question. This is kind of basic, but how do you upload your syllabus onto Learning Suite or whatever you're using?
Learning Suite actually gives you an opportunity to do that. When you click on the syllabus, it gives you two options. One would be to go to a link, and another way would be to actually load it as a document.
So another question about that. If you use the syllabus creator through Learning Suite, I feel like it must upload deadlines straight to students. And I know they use those deadlines to know when assignments are due. Is there any way to connect that at all with the syllabus?
So in Learning Suite, if you don't mind, I'll jump in and answer that. In Learning Suite, if you create your assignments and you have given due dates for those, and you use the built-in Learning Suite syllabus, they are already connected there. And so they can see that schedule of assignments in the Learning Suite syllabus. Kirsten, do you have anything to add to that?
I do. I don't know if Kirsten's ready to, but quickly, if you do upload your syllabus, what I would recommend is not putting due dates and stuff like that in the written syllabus that you're uploading, and instead point them to either the schedule or the assignments page in Learning Suite. That way you don't have to update the due dates in multiple places, and it'll make it a lot easier for that document to roll over semester to semester. And yeah, so it's good for you. It's good for the students. That's my high recommendation.
Yeah, I was going to say in Learning Suite, they are dynamic. If you update dates on, exam dates or assignment dates, it'll update the syllabus. The syllabus is not pretty like these are. It's your general standard Word doc, So I think that, if you're going to upload, and also if you upload a file or if you send to a website, it then turns off the rest of the syllabus. So you could then just refer them back. But I will tell you this, they have access to a combined schedule, the schedule in the class, they have a dashboard, they have the assignments page. So there's at least 5 other locations that they can get those assignments and complete them and complete the exams and stuff from those other locations. So don't feel like you're completely, leaving them in the dust, because there's a lot of other ways that they can access the schedule. You could even just say, especially since it's somewhat of a legal document, it's not really, but it partially is. You can say, please refer to the class for current dates and times and dues.
So I have a question about that. One of the things I rely upon with the Learning Suite syllabus is are the policies, the university policies. And while I really like this visual syllabus, I like not having to worry about those policies because they're pre-populated by the university.
Right.
So you can't really do both, can you?
There is a way. There's a
There
way.
is?
Yeah, what you would simply do is in the course, like a course description or course basics or whatever, just link to the document or allow the students to download it from there. And don't put in everything else, but then use the rest of the syllabus for all the other elements, right?
Yeah, and learn so you can customize which fields you show. So you could just not show certain fields and instead say, you know, here's my syllabus document to download and do it that way. And we do on the CTL website list all of the policies too. So if you do really want to break loose from that but you want to include the policies, we have a page on CTL. I'll find it and put it in the chat, and it has all the current statements.
Yeah. So you would, but if you wanted to use the ones in Learning Suite and a couple of the other features there, you could turn off.
I already got it.
Yeah, you could turn off, like I said, the fields that you don't need that are going to be in your downloaded document, and just create the ability to download that document in one of the fields that's in, because those are all rich text fields. So you can have attachments or links to a website if you create it in a Google Doc or, whatever like that.
So what you're saying is that if you enable the course syllabus, if you put this in the syllabus, it will negate all the course syllabus function, but you can go around that by putting it in the course description and a link. Is that what you're saying?
That is what I'm saying. Yeah.
Okay.
And you can add custom fields too. So it doesn't have to be in
that way.
course description. You could make a separate field that says online syllabus or whatever.
Or download the syllabus or whatever you wanted to call it. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you'd like a little customized help, just give us a holler, and Mike or Kirsten or one of us be happy to walk you through that.
And we're
Absolutely.
revamping it. The new syllabus is going to be amazing. So.
I have two comments and a question.
Okay.
One comment I have is about student and office hours. I did some focus groups with my students, and I learned something really that surprised me, which was that many students said they were afraid both to visit office hours and to visit with the TAs. And so one thing I started doing was giving an assignment to meet the TAs and come to my office hours and meet me to break the ice. What the students were saying was some of them feel hesitant about the process of asking for help. They kind of don't want to admit that they need help. And so that several people in our department have been doing that. And I think that really helps a lot.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing is that there's a book called The Graphic Syllabus that I've been referring to. I don't know, I see some people nodding, by Linda Nielsen. I'm just going to post it into the chat. There's a link to the Amazon. Can I share? Is it all right if I share my screen?
Should be. Yep.
Says it's disabled.
You can go ahead now.
Good. Yeah.
Here we go.
Yeah.
So here's the one that I have for my course, and I actually put this up. So this is part of the syllabus, but then I use it in class, and I basically refer to this every day for just 15 seconds. Here's where we are. Here's where we've been. Here's where we're going. Students have said they like just kind of have a graphic representation of where we are and where we're going. So I found that helpful. Then I have one question. So some of you may have heard this story went viral. A professor, I don't remember where, put $50 in a locker on campus, assigned his students to read the syllabus, and in the middle of a paragraph said, there's a locker at this location with $50. Here's the combination. No students went and claimed the money. So does anyone have any suggestions on how you get the students to actually read and meaningfully read the syllabus if we're putting all this effort into the content.
So, I mean, my first suggestions are just things that have already been mentioned. And so Joey talked about giving a quiz during the first week of class to encourage them to read it. But as you say, part of the problem is getting them to meaningfully read it. So the other thing that I have started to do is just to, when a student has a question, that I'll give them kind of the short answer and then tell them you can find the rest of that information in the syllabus, so that all throughout the semester I'm kind of encouraging them to go back to the syllabus and back to the syllabus. So it's not just this one-off, I have to read this during the during the first week of the semester because there's going to be a quiz on it, and then they forget about it and never look at it again. So that's one thing that I've started incorporating. I'm sure there are other suggestions that would be helpful too.
I'm just going to jump in too and kind of say, another thing is if syllabi, if the results of this workshop are that syllabi are improved across campus, that's going to help students want to look at syllabi a little bit more as well too. And if more of us are also doing some of the things that we're talking about here, having that quiz, referring them back to the syllabus, and so forth, eventually we hope more students will get in the habit of taking the syllabus seriously and looking at it. And so that's something I think we can help each other out with collectively, right? If we kind of do that as a whole.
Yeah, and I think I don't know the story that you told about the $50, but I also don't know what that person's syllabus looked like, so, depending on how it was written and how it was laid out, I think what we're talking about here is coming up with a way to make the syllabus a document where if you hid something like that in the middle, that students would see it. And so I think that's the goal, is that the language is inviting, that it's visually inviting, that I understand how to find the information that I need, and that the language doesn't intimidate me away from engaging in it, because even the word syllabus can be scary to students. That just seems very formal and worrisome. And it just seems like, oh, it's probably going to be easier for me to ask my teacher or easier for me to ask a friend than engage in this document that has this very formal language. So I think, what we're really talking about here is trying to create a document that is the beginnings of the creation of community that we want to have in the classroom. And that's a document that you can engage with and encounter rather than be intimidated by.
I have a better idea. You could hide phrases or ways to get extra credit points within the syllabus, and I'm sure students would read it.
There you go. Extra credit is worth a lot more than $50, right?
Yeah, actually, there was another thing going around on social media about someone talking about hiding, emailing otter pictures to them for extra credit.
I liked Joey's idea when he was saying, trying to get them to come to his office. You can see the syllabus in the same way, trying to get them to engage with the syllabus. So like for one of my assignments, they have to do something that's related to setting up a classroom for literacy instruction. And so in there's a video that I've taken of a former student who's out teaching, and it's a video tour of her classroom. And so it's a way that they use the syllabus. So it's not just a matter of read it so that you can get credit or whatnot, but you need to engage with it in order to do well on the assignment and to, I don't know, just kind of help have a relationship. Showing up in Joey's office and eating some food and getting to see his succulent, anything, I don't know. I'm always thinking about motivation. I don't ever want it to be tied to a grade necessarily, because then that feels like punishment, kind of what Julie was talking about earlier. But warm language to me is like, hey, I'm inviting you. I'd love it if you'd come to my syllabus kind of approach, as opposed to you better read the syllabus. I don't know. Those are just some thoughts.
Michael has a question.
Michael Child,
Michael Child.
Are you there? Do you have a question?
Doug also has his hand up. So do we want to here. What?
That's old. I'll take it down.
Oh, okay.
I'll just quickly say I put in the syllabus speed date activity. I just that I talked about in the chat. So if you want to look at that, that's a really nice way to do a first day activity where your students will also get to know each other.
So Michael, if you want to put your question in the chat, we could go ahead and deal with, take a look at that. Let's see. Keeping a syllabus as short as possible will encourage students to read it. Yes. We all like short, don't we? If we can accomplish the same task in one paragraph versus 2 or 3.
If I may, I teach ESL, and I found that a really helpful thing for getting students to engage with syllabi is, instead of having declarative or like short sentence topic headings, I frame the headings of my questions, or frame the headings of my syllabus as questions. So like, why do I need to take this class? What am I going to learn in this class? What information, like what are the required materials for my class? Stuff like that, I think has been really helpful in helping students understand, or like be able to more clearly see where they need to go in the syllabus to get information.
Great idea. Great idea. Well, we kind of are at our time. So I want to allow people who need to get somewhere by 11 o'clock to feel like they've been here, and we will kind of wrap things up, and you're free to go at any time. As well as our presenters, thank you for your preparation and the great ideas, and thank everyone here for some additional great ideas. And if you need to go, feel free to go. If you can hang around for a few minutes, those who want to maybe ask a question or two, I think we can just hang around for a couple of minutes. But otherwise, thank you for being here, and we will see you next time.
So Richard, I put the link to my slides in the chat. Should I also, is there a person I should send it to as well?
If you could send those to Mike Johnson.
Okay.
Yeah, I have it though. So, but it still wouldn't hurt to send them, but I do have it. So I'll try to add that to I'll create the page today where that's going. And Katrina, right? Katrina, I have your thing. It's on the event on the website, but I'm going to move it to the page where we have the recording. So if you don't have a problem with that, I'll keep that there. And if Joey, if you have anything that you want to include, please send it over.
Sure, I can send you a link right now.
Thanks.
Okay, well, I think sounds like there are not any additional questions. So thank you again, everyone, for being here, and we'll say goodbye.
Okay, thank you guys.
Thank you.